Today I want to talk about Robert Frost and the poem Mending Walls that I recorded the other day. Robert Frost was one of the most popular poets of the 20th century. He won 4 Pulitzer Prizes for poetry. He won a Congressional Gold Medal. He was the Poet Laureate of Vermont. This despite a life that was frequently marred by grief and loss and hardship. He suffered from depression. Many members of his family did, and there was some suicide. But he overcame all that and became one of our best loved poets, and some of his poems are really viewed as icons, in particular probably Stopping by Woods on Snowy Evening and The Road Not Taken. But you can learn all that just by taking a trip to Wikipedia. What I'd like to talk about is my experience, in particular with this poem. Many years ago, when I was a young college student at Alma College, the Harvard of the Midwest, go Scots, I somehow, don't ask me, somehow managed to win a poetry contest. I got $50, which was good pizza money back then, and I got invited also to get to see Robert Bly, the great Robert Bly, another one of our greatest poets of the 20th century and 21st century. He's still around. I got to meet him, go to see him speak. He came to our college, and I got to have lunch with him along with about a dozen or so other students and staff members. 2 things I remember about that lunch very clearly. One, Robert Bly talking about how much the writer James Dickey detested him and couldn't stand him. And also, I remember a story, can't even remember who told this, but someone told a story about Robert Frost, which may be apocryphal, but where he came to a college like Alma, gave a speech, talked about his poetry, did a reading, and was taking questions afterward. And someone asked him, "What did you mean when you said, 'Good fences make good neighbors'?" Reply given by Robert Frost, according to this story, was that he contemplated for a moment and then let the person know, "I think what I meant when I said good fences make good neighbors was that good fences make good neighbors," and didn't explain anything beyond that. And I took this story and ran with it. I carried that story around for many years thinking, oh yes, it's awesome that you don't overly interpret the poem or the poet. You take what they mean, and good fences make good neighbors. Now I don't even know if I actually read the poem, but I assumed that this talked about how the stoic New Englander, a bit brusque, not too overly gregarious, direct to the point, honest, hardworking, but depending on that isolation and you stick to your business, I'll stick to mine. Good fences make good neighbors. It was only many years later I actually read the poem and began to question if that's really what he meant at all. The narrator of the poem really seems to call it into question, and that really resonated with me eventually. My favorite line, I think, has to do with when he raises the question, before I started building a wall, I would want to know what was I walling in and what was I walling out? What am I losing by building this wall and then maintaining it? And where we have walls, do we still need them? Did we ever need them? Are we just maintaining borders and boundaries between ourselves and other people that don't need to be there? And I began to understand I can transfer this, it's not just a personal level, but it does operate on a personal level certainly, but it operates between nations just as well. When we wall off our southern border, or we start talking about having extremely restrictive immigration quotas from different countries, are we gaining more in our own protection, or are we losing the possibilities that exist when we allow for those connections to be built and maintained openness, and we maintain openness with other countries? And then recently I looked at some criticism. They said, no, Frost did mean that. Just because the narrator of the poem says one thing and seems to be questioning the fence and letting it fall down, no, Frost himself wants the walls. So what's the true story? I finally come to the conclusion, as John Green says, it doesn't matter what the authorial intent was, it matters how the poem resonates with me. Frost may have meant he wanted stronger fences, or he may have meant we need to build bridges instead of walls. But what matters is what I think. The value of much poetry, and really a lot of art as a whole, doesn't have to do with what it tells us about the poet or the artist. It has to do with what it reveals about us. So we need to look at how we relate to a piece of art or a piece of writing. What does it tell us about ourselves and our relationship to the world? We do this, in fact, not only with nations and not only with individual people, but also with concepts and ideas. And the very institution of poetry and books, for that matter, have we allowed ourselves to start building walls around them? Have we decided that These don't have practical value to us because we've largely eliminated a lot of it from our educational institutions. And I'm certainly one pleased to set a lot of that aside to focus more on contemporary young adult fiction in particular, because it connects more easily, more readily with many of our students. But there's still a value to much of that artwork and those classics. And we need to be open to that. We need to make sure we're not building walls between us and those valuable works of art and works of literature. This is why I've decided to possibly begin a regular section of my vlogs that will present some poems. Some new, some old, some my own. We'll see. I hope you'll like it, or at least give it a chance. Don't build a wall. Leave yourself open. Put it in a gate, a style, a bridge. We'll see what happens. Till next time, don't forget to be awesome, and I will talk to you again soon. Hopefully.